from which he came was that the Great Commission is a work of the mission field. The Great Commission is about what American Christianity terms missions. And missions are, well, missions generally in the American evangelical world are having people go to foreign countries, translating the Bible, or trying to win converts from the local population. It is a work that has a personal claim of God upon the individual, and the God presented is a God who cares primarily, if not exclusively, about the individual. He's not a God who really cares about dictatorships. He's not a God who cares about that country's racking inflation rate. He's not a deity who gives really much mind about school systems, whether there's any homeschooling allowed in that country or whether it's illegal. He's not a God who cares about the money supply and the central bank of that country, which is responsible for the inflation rate, and which has effectively been an operation among the elites of that country to steal from the poor, whom are required to use the circulating medium of exchange in all their transactions, and even to try to save future buying power in that instrument, right? The God that these missionaries offer is a quiet God, a private God, a personal God. He cares about the individual. Now, the work of God in the individual, let me not slight that. Let me say that it is important that the individual begin with personal reform. That's what conversion is. You hear about conversion in some churches in Chattanooga as if that's the main doctrine of the Bible, that conversion to become a Christian is the only thing that the Bible is all about. And in fact, in some Baptist churches, the sermon every day, every Lord's Day, and even the Wednesday sermon is about why you should become a Christian. That's very much like what we read in the report of Franklin Graham's visit to Chattanooga. And the only place you can read that report of what he said in detail and the analysis of it is at Nooganomics.com. Our chief sponsor, that's Nooganomics.com, the website for the man who matters. And it's not popular because very few people really matter. I say that not to disparage other people. Of course, I'm not disparaging you, my listener, even though you're not a subscriber. And the reason I said you're not a subscriber yet, and that's because you rightly think that if you have just 5 minutes on my show, the David Tulis program here at Nooga Radio, that you've got everything I've got to say. And in a way, that's true. So even if I'm going on for 2 hours a day, you're getting in 5 minutes all the essentials, and there's really no need to read what I have to say. There's no point in reading a 4,000-word piece by David Tulis on the big God or small God or problem in Chattanooga churches. There's no point if you've heard me say something about it here. Why read in detail? There's just no point. I understand that, and that's because radio is, in fact, the most vivacious and powerful medium that there is, and that's because it's immediate. It's right now. It's right present tense. It's here, and it's as if my mouth were between your ears, and you're listening to me on your headphones or on your smartphone, and you're running the tape that amplifies my voice in your car speakers, or you have a real radio and you're hearing David Tulis on FM stereo. And that I do appreciate 92.7. It's a wonderful band. We're even more thrilled at having the digital channel. That's digital HD, high definition digital 4, 95.3 HD4. Do tune your radio to that. I think you should favor digital. That is the coming thing. 95.3 HD4, high definition 4. And radio is so powerful that, as I say, you don't have to read David Tulis. You don't even have to subscribe to Nooganomics.com. But it's not a popular website, and that's because it's for people who matter, and there are not really many of those. So you are the man who listens to my show, so you matter, okay? Because you intend to hear me for 5 minutes, you're the man who matters by definition. And then another group is the reader. And I'd like there to be some crossover, of course. And so I urge you, my listener, to join the other reader or join the reader at Nooganomics.com. That's Nooganomics.com. Subscriptions are free, and it is a charitable effort, right? A charitable press effort here in Chattanooga, totally nonprofit, and a part not of the media at all. In fact, we have Andy Burke, the mayor, who says no matter what he tells you, he's not a member of the media. And that's true. I'm not. I'm a member of the press. And that's really more important, whatever the financial interest of that website might be. It is a nonprofit, but it is, in fact, a member of the media. And the voice of dissent, right? And the cheerful voice of rebuilding and reconstruction and lococentrism, written by and edited by David Tulis, the blogger with the biggest pen here in Chattanooga. Now, the analysis of the missionary speaker is, as I say, it is that God cares about the individual, and the mission effort that he has is, I would say, privatized, and it does not care about the public weal. It does not care about the commonwealth, and his instrumentalities are outside the purview of the God that the missionary brings, competing, of course, with the Muslim deity. The would-be convert has heard about the Muslim deity as well. And I just ask you a question. Okay, you my listener, not being a Christian, you can probably be more objective on this question. Which would you rather worship? All things being equal, okay? Would you rather worship a God who cares only about the individual, or would you rather worship a God who cares about the banking sector, about warfare, about expansion, about how you live your life, about what foods you eat, about how you should marry, about how many wives you can have? In what way is it possible to kill someone legally and not have any compunction in doing it? Which God would you rather worship? One that gives you a lot of liberty and great claims, a God that lets you kind of save yourself by your powerful works? Or would you worship a God who simply cares about your personal salvation? Well, I mean, all things being equal, I probably would pick the second one. That would be Allah, as propounded by Muslims, and propounded with blood and death by the most faithful ones, right? The most theologically astute Muslims are the ones who have the terror mission in their eye, and have, as Mr. Saipov had in New York, the downward spiral. The words in one news account, the downward spiral to his truck attack on the bike lane in New York. Well, and I bring up this question about the Presbyterian mission because the problem seems endemic. The problem seems endemic in Christianity in Chattanooga, and that is the private pulpit, the pulpit that in which God is not a king. He's just a close and dear friend who cares about your soul, and has provided you an offer, right? The offer of salvation. You just have to kind of vote for yourself and accept it, and you have attained it. You attain it by choosing Him, as they say, by opening your heart to the Lord Jesus, and you have attained salvation. Which, of course, you'll be told at the same time is all of grace. You'll be told at the same time, though contradictorily, that it is all of grace. You are saved by God's grace by His death on the cross through faith, and that not of yourself, not of works. Those things all contradict, because in the end, you're not saved by yourself, and no one is. No one chooses God. God chooses him or her, and that is what Presbyterians generally teach. Though there seems to be a short stop just after the him or the her, and there's not much to say, except in the Neo-Puritan wing. There's not much to say in Presbyterianism about the larger culture. Though I don't believe this argument. I don't believe in that argument, and that's why I have a problem. And that problem. And the interesting thing is, I met a man yesterday, a local doctor, and he said he had read my piece. And I'm always just delighted when someone says that they know who I am. I mean, I really think that the only person who knows me is you. Okay. So whenever somebody else other than you meets me and says, "Oh, I know who you are," or I listen to your program, I'm always just astounded. I mean, that there could be somebody other than you who listens to my program. I mean, I just don't get it. How is that possible? Well, here was a doctor at this church, and was there with his wife and his children. And I made a brief discussion about the thing that I had been kind of raging about, you might say, in the past few days. And that is this. It is also something that you're not going to find at any other platform than Nooganomics.com. And that is the great neglect in our courts about a Christian concept. And I proposed to this doctor who was skeptical. He was skeptical about what I had to say. But I proposed that if we had this Christian concept in the Tennessee Code annotated, in fact, it's at Title 39, Chapter 11. If we had this law enforced, we would have an end to many problems in Chattanooga and Hamilton County. And in fact, if the reform spread, right, like leaven in the lump that is Tennessee with its 6.5 million people and its grand capital in Nashville, if it spread like leaven, we would have an end in many ways, an end to the police state, an end to the jail crowding problem that is driving Sheriff Jim Hammond nuts. Jim Hammond is just going crazy with the problem of jail overcrowding. The idea of keeping the downtown jail, which is broken down, and which is just a disaster, continuing in its decay. What should we do? Should we build a new jail? Well, the people are not going to have that. They will not pay for that. And so there has been proposed an expansion at the Silverdale Correctional Facility in East Brainerd. And of course, Core Civic, the for-profit, the gangrenous for-profit corporation, publicly traded on the stock market, will of course be making its profit for the shareholders and itself in the process. Now, what is it? What law am I talking about? And I mentioned this to the doctor with whom I had a very friendly conversation, and whose conversation encouraged me because he had read at least half of my piece. Is this? Here's the law, and that is the requirement for culpable mental state in every criminal case. And I've got more work to do on this question, particularly to get out to the reader at Nooganomics.com the fine conversation that Judge Don Poole in criminal court and Judge Lila Statham in Sessions Court gave here to me, and that is that it's the law. Yeah, it's the law. But the point I think we need to make is that Tom Greenholz in criminal court and Judge Poole, and then the third jurist, Barry Steelman, I think can bring reform by just insisting on this requirement for culpable mental state. And here's why that's important, because, well, here's what it is, and then here's why it's important. It's important because in a criminal matter, there has to be, as part of the accusation, the claim by Neil Pinkston that the alleged offender intended to violate the law. That's really never proven. It's never argued. And I don't think it's part of the indictment process, though it's required. It's required that in the definition of a crime, it's required to be understood that a person who commits an offense who acts intentionally, knowingly, recklessly, or with criminal negligence, as the definition of the offense requires, with respect to each element of the offense. And that is that a culpable mental state, secondly, a culpable mental state is required within this title unless the definition of an offense plainly dispenses with a mental element. In other words, if the statute is strict liability, just the doing of the act is the crime, then the act must have as a proof that the act was committed, an argument that the act was committed, it has to argue for intentionality, right? And that comes from the Bible. That's in the passage about the flying axe head that kills the woodsman. Did the man who killed him do so by mistake? Did the handle and the head separate and the man perish because the axe head hit him lethally? Or was it intentional? Did the man with the handle in his hand intend to kill his colleague in the wood chopping expedition out in the middle of nowhere, right? So we have a dead man, and we have a man who's fled since to the city of refuge, which is what the passage is about. It establishes that in Deuteronomy, that city of refuge. So things can be sorted out, right? The avenger of blood is the family, and the dead man was not intended to be killed. And so if it's an unintentional act, it's manslaughter, and there's a blood price to be paid, the accident victim's family can obtain restitution for the dead man from the individual who caused his death. And then the amount of that compensation would depend on whether there was carelessness or whether it was a pure accident, right? Purely an accident. If it was careless, then the amount would be more, right? Because you're edging closer to intentionality. And if it's just an accident that was purely providential, well, then there's less to be paid. But there's probably still something to be paid to the survivors, because after all, justice is about victims' rights. Points up in the discussion, and I suggested to my interlocutor there at the lunch table. There was a missions event. There was a lunch being served, and I brought to my interlocutor the prospect that this is a godly law in the Tennessee Code, and that we could end our crowding problem. We could end the police state largely if Judge Greenholz, Judge Poole, and Judge Steelman would enforce this statute and say, I'm going to have to insist on this statute being honored. And Neil and all you prosecutors, don't bring a case unless you plan to argue that. And I want to see it. We want to see these things. We want to see these claims made in the indictment. So if you're going to go before the grand jury to accuse someone, you better be sure, please, that there is mens rea, that there is culpable intent. It has to be part of the charge, and I'm expecting you to prove it. And if we have that as a goal, then we're going to have restraint of police authority, restraint of the power to arrest and detain and charge and jail and demand bond for and trial. Okay, we'll have less of that. That's less policing. I think we need to have less policing overall, because after all, we are a pacific people here in Chattanooga and Hamilton County. There are some wild private criminals out there. They're said to be gang members, but generally, there's occasional crimes of passion. There's assault. There's occasional burglary. There's some thievery going on. Private crimes. Okay, but one of the largest crimes the largest area of crime today is the state itself, and that would be by abuse of we might say the cartel authority of the use of the law by law enforcement. I'd say that there needs to be a growing consciousness of the problems of having security and your religious belief that the state's job is to provide security. And the alternative argument, of course, that the Christianity makes, that the Bible makes, is that the job of the king, the job of the president, the job of the governor, of the government, the civil authority, is justice. It is justice. It is not security. If we rely on the state for security, we have to accept the police state. We have to accept the warfare and surveillance state. We have to accept the regulatory state. All those parts of the modern state are implied if you want security and safety to be provided by the state. The state biblically does not have that authority. And so I think we can't, it's going to take some time for people to read their Bibles. And it's going to take maybe longer for preachers in Chattanooga to preach about these laws. But it is a law in the scriptures. And I tried to I tried to get an interview with this man who was the speaker yesterday. He refused to give me an interview. He refused to give me an interview. I said, I'd like to interview you about, I got a question about your sermon. Could you give me? I'm a media person. I'm mainstream media. He didn't know who he doesn't know who I am. So I did a mainstream media, gave him my card. Would you give me an interview? And he declined. He declined to give me an interview. The head of a major mission organization here in the South, part of the Presbyterian denomination. Now that's kind of sad. I thought, well, maybe I could have done it differently. Maybe I could have approached him differently, just kind of sidled up to him with a conversation and then asked for an interview when he could see where I was coming from. But why should he see where I'm coming from? If he's a Christian, an apologist, and he cares about the way God presents himself to the world, why would he not give an interview to a journalist he, as far as he knew, was going to be hostile? That's why he declined. He thought maybe I was going to be hostile to him. But okay, well, maybe he should have taken that and just done the best he could have. But he didn't. He declined to give an interview, and I moved on. The definition of culpable mental state is intentional. Refers to a person who acts intentionally with respect to the nature of the conduct or to a result of the conduct when it is the person's conscious objective or desire to engage in the conduct or the cause the result. That's what intentionality statute requires. And I think Christianity has a lot to say about this issue. Christianity has the answers to many of our problems: the homeless problem, the court abuse problem, the commercial government problem. I spent a couple hours last night in a work of charity reading the Tennessee Code annotated in Title 55, and I'm doing it to help somebody. But I'm doing it to know. I'm just doing it to know, for God's grace, extending the mercy I can give to some poor soul out there fearing arrest. David Tulis.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4.